Предлагаю начать нашу сессию.
Let's get started. I understand that not everyone has woken up, but I hope that they will join us. But even if they don't join us, we will have more time for discussions and questions. At the very beginning, I would like to tell you and explain why we pick up this title for our session. As you see, our sector is starting different cultural changes and structural changes, and we have been witnessing different changes that could have impacted, or maybe this is a question, whether they have any impact on the change of state policy on agriculture, and what has happened. Now we can say that there is the complete denationalization of agricultural business. You could see the share of agricultural industries is 2.7%. For some areas it's quite important, but for the majority of areas it's not so important. In general, there could be some exceptions, but in general, when we speak about the general situation, our state-owned agricultural businesses are less efficient than the private companies. What has happened else? As you remember, after the privatization in the 1990s, we had the companies with lots of co-owners. And now de-collectivization has happened, as Mr. Uzun says. Now the number of companies with more than 500 people is only 0.4%. And you could see here the transition of the ownership to the limited number of people. So we have just one owner for many rural businesses. What does it mean to have one owner? It means that when the government supports the development of rural businesses and provides the subsidies, it supports not only the income, and this was demonstrated by our researchers. As you see, the management and the owner are the major, also the government, are the major distributors of the welfare, and there is no strict dependence or correlation between the revenue and the income of the workers of the rural business. We could see also the changes in the agrarian structure. I would like to stand up because I don't see the screen. We see the significant changes in the agrarian structure during the decade. Over the decade, in 40% of regions, we see the corporate structure. 50% of the produce is produced by agricultural businesses. You could see in the corporate structure, as you see here on the slides, lots of the number of agri-holding companies. It means that in 30% of cases we have more than 25% of companies which are part of agrarian holding companies. The family form, which prevailed in 59% of the regions, shrank during the decade. And this is okay, because you could see that the people are not producing so more in the private farms. But still, we have some regions where we have more than 7% of the regions with quite an active farming. Why does it happen? The development of agri-holding structure is quite a good thing, because they have good technologies, so they can attract best specialists and the credits and loans. But where we have lots of agri-holding structures, in such areas, the employment in agricultural sector diminishes significantly, and also the number of rural population. People fail to find their jobs and they leave the rural areas. But where we have farms, the number of population doesn't decline so fast. On the contrary, it's growing. So let's have a look at the SMEs. And we have also always thought that this includes private households and peasant farms. But in fact, we have lots of micro enterprises, and these micro enterprises could be structured by revenue or by the number of employees. So we have the companies which so we have less than 1% of large companies. What has happened to the agricultural lands? So they were declining when we declining up to 2006. And then you could see here the average numbers, but this average statistics means nothing. Have a look at the differentiation of different agricultural businesses by the area. You could see that from year to year there is there are shifts in the areas towards large agricultural businesses. So we have about 13 different agricultural businesses without agricultural land. They can produce livestock or rear the livestock. And the number of stock doesn't depend on the total area of land, and there are no environmental requirements or any regulations which set any restrictions or anything about the wastes or disposal of such wastes after the rearing of cattle. So in general, the area of agricultural land is more than 5,000 hectares per one agricultural business. So these agricultural businesses could be the part or not the part of agrarian holding companies. So huge areas, 50,000 by the way of hectares could be one rural district. It turns out so that all our restrictions or limits doesn't work against land concentration. And sometimes land could be concentrated in the companies or in the hands of the companies which have nothing to do with the agricultural business. And they have never had any intention to work on land. So they have this land as an asset. Or the shares could be as a lien or as a pledge of this company. So we have no researchers on such companies who own this land and do nothing with that. This is just their asset. So here you could see the example. This is the average area of plots of agricultural businesses and who is in charge of that. You could see here different individual numbers and different regions of Russia. And the owners could be either physical or individuals or legal entities. They could be the owners of this land. And you could see also that sometimes agricultural production shifts towards more favorable regions. So what happens to the people who were left in the regions from where the enterprises moved? So people find no job. According to the statistic monitoring, the statistics monitoring doesn't control the rural employment of people. So we have the general employment of people, and employment could be very different, but where this employment is, nobody knows. You could see here the shifts in the production, in the rural production, agricultural production. This is quite an acute issue. As you see, the support of quite advanced businesses resulted in the following. You could see here that 100 large agricultural businesses have 1/3 of all assets and almost 60% of all bank loans. It means that these companies are developing and are progressing. Have a look at this table. From year to year, the number of companies which get the subsidies from the government is declining. And those companies who have the access to subsidies have better conditions for their development. And now have a look at this table. This is the share of the largest agricultural businesses in the region. You could see that the Pskov region has one company out of 187, which produces agricultural produce. So again, the same situation is in Kaluga region, which produces 1/3 of produce. If there is the growth point, according to the theory, there should be the development around or the territory of the development. But as Ekaterina Gataulina said, our businesses are like submarines. They have everything. And around these growth points, there is no development. And this is another big issue and challenge for us. So now we have the problem with the concentration of capital production and location of resources, distribution of resources. So how can we change, or how should the state change its policy? We understand that before the state policy used to stimulate the production. This problem has been resolved. We cannot say that we have the lack of global lack of produce. We have just the lack of some produce. We reduce the input, increase the export. In such conditions, when the issue of the lack of produce has been already resolved, should we change this policy, state policy, in the agrarian sector? And here you could see the questions or the issues for the discussion. And after my long introduction, where I try to explain why we choose this topic, I would like to introduce our participants of our session. This is Maria Mityanina, agricultural attaché from Denmark. Welcome. Alexander Merzlov, the president of the Most Beautiful Villages of Russia Association and Moscow Timirazov Academy professor. I'm happy to see you here. And then Sergio Schneider, professor of the sociology Rio Grande do Sul University from Brazil. Welcome to Moscow. And Dmitry Butusov, deputy chairman for agriculture, Ural region, who is working a lot on the development of large agricultural businesses. So I would like to give the floor to you first. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. Thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure to take a part in this forum. This is quite an important topic. I'll try to be very brief, and I will also try to formulate in a nutshell our understanding of the development strategy, how the agricultural, agro-industrial sector should develop. And this is the demonstration of my experience talking about our region. I would like to refer to the Ural region situation, but I'm going to speak globally about our country, but of course referring to the example of our region, because the situation in regions is different. So we are in non-black soil region, but our soil is of high quality, and we have some black soil there. Our resources for a quite small region are 24,000 square kilometers. We have 1.5 million hectares of arable land, and nearly all this land is involved in the cultivation. So we have passed the stage of quite an extensive development. The region has already faced the stage of quite extensive development, and it exhausted all the possibilities to gain on the production. So we have non-cultivated land, which amounts to about 1%. So now we think what to do next. At this stage, we think what to do next. And over the past decade, we saw different changes, quite high-quality changes. The number of agricultural businesses, which amounted not long ago to 568, now is 252. So we have also quite a significant reduction of agricultural businesses. So we used to have 1,400, now it's quite fewer. We also see the reduction in the private households, but at the same time the concentration of production is growing when we speak on average. So the average area of the agriculture business is about 5,000 hectares, and now we have quite large agglomerations which have several thousands of hectares of land. But about 10-15 years ago, this area was not more than 2,700 hectares. As for peasant farms, the area of their plots increased twofold. Why I mentioned all that? I just wanted to show that there is the trend in different regions to develop, and we see how these trends are developing, what to do with that, and how to live with that. Now I would like to mention different effects which are in line with these trends. This is what I have already mentioned. I have already mentioned the increase in the production concentration, and here we have mere benefits and some drawbacks. New technologies arrive, for instance, technologies in the development, but there are also different challenges. Such challenges as what to do and how to tackle the issue of unemployment in the rural area. Unfortunately, we have the rural citizens who are not well adapted, who could not align themselves to the technological progress. Very often we question ourselves. So agricultural businesses are growing, but rural population becomes poorer. Unfortunately, people in the rural areas who fail to find jobs have to leave the rural areas and look for other employment in other places. Unfortunately, in the rural area, we don't have many opportunities. Another important component, which is important for the territory development, is the reduction of the budget efficiency of the agrarian business. I have already mentioned that agricultural businesses have different preferences and allowances, benefits, so they have already past different stages in the development, and of course we should continue this policy, but we don't have so many sources of for investment to support this territory. I would rather take two sources, such as land tax and also individual income tax. So robotization and automation improves the productivity. But by the way, yesterday at the breakfast, it was mentioned that we have the plant which was automated, and 10 years ago 500 people used to work there, and now about 100, not 100, but 500, but 100 people, and 1/4 of the employees are IT people who can operate this plant remotely. Then there is also the specificity of the work of large agri-holding companies. So they work at the interregional scale. So we have the cost centers and revenue center or income centers, and so these centers can also be redistributed from region to regions. Sometimes holding companies could work on large areas for getting the raw materials. Much depends on the production cost, and we see imbalance in the distribution of incomes and added value. And now we understand that we need new professions, new jobs. And this is the fact, we have to tackle this issue. Another important topic is digitalization. We understand that in the near future this trend is going to persist and progress further. We want to have more people adapted to the new challenges. That's why we should seriously think about the people training. Another thing I would like to mention is the environmental burden. We should redistribute productivity on the territory of the region. So there is the stereotype or common belief that we have one of the most strict or the strictest environmental regulations. But in my opinion, that life and our production process is much faster than agricultural regulations, and sometimes these regulations don't take into account the environmental burden. This is another important issue, and we should work on that. So speaking generally, every issue merits more considerations. But in my opinion, when we speak about large or small businesses, in my opinion, we should not speak about these businesses as something opposite, because the economy should be able to absorb all types of businesses, small and medium-sized and big businesses. But let's think about the conditions that we should create for businesses, small, large and big, and whether we have the niche for organic agricultural businesses. For instance, the large business which is involved only in vertical integration is the response to the absence of the proper conditions. Very often, when I talk to the large agricultural businesses, I'm asking, why don't you outsource your services to some small businesses? And they said, no, we cannot do that. We create infrastructure for ourselves. And now large businesses do everything for themselves. They are self-sufficient, and small businesses could not do that. And now when we speak about digitalization, digitalization should be also affordable and affordable for small businesses. People would like to have the good internet connection or access in every point of their field, or they would like to get the results which you can read from the satellite due to the remote control. So this is quite a just and fair question. And here you could see what we can do to improve the development in the agri-industrial sector. So first we need to improve the competition, provide access to the digital infrastructure, and try to reduce the digital inequality. Speaking about the social component, in my opinion, it doesn't matter what we are talking about, we still hope that the Ministry of Agriculture will start working on the new program, or will continue working on this new program, and will also participate in this program. And in this program, we should take into account the social area. And no production is possible if we do not develop the social infrastructure in the rural area. So I believe that we should share our responsibility with businesses. On the one hand, we have the state, and on the other hand, businesses. And of course, we should intensify the corporate responsibility of large businesses. Honestly, in the Russian Federation, this issue is mostly dependent on the point of view of a particular owner or the manager of the agricultural business. So we have lots of agricultural holding companies who are involved only in plant growing. So they hire workers based on seasonal conditions, and they are not involved to the full extent in all the processes. But we should speak about the social and budget efficiency. And when we have seasonal workers, then there won't be then we neglect this social burden, and nobody is asking farmer whether this farmer managed to clean the road or help his compatriots living with him in the rural area. So we should think about the incentives to make social aspects also a priority. If top 10 companies invest in the social responsibility about several hundred rubles. So this will help several 100,000 rubles. I'm talking about the water supply or heat supply. So this would be very beneficial. But we cannot make anyone invest in the social infrastructure, but still this is quite an important topic to discuss. And to sum up my talk, of course I can talk endlessly on different topics, but in general I would like to say that the agricultural sector in the regions where the sector is well developed, such as black soil regions or the regions with high quality soils, In these regions, the agricultural sector has already seen quite a good development, and now it's a high time to revisit our objectives for the next decade. And if we don't do that, then we will just try to catch up and respond to the challenges that we are facing. It seems to me we should be more proactive and try to think in advance what should be done next, and of course think about what should be done in our programs. A lot of programs have been implemented and are implemented, and very often these programs are very promising. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, probably we'll ask questions during the main discussion, but I believe that Dmitry touches upon a very interesting aspect. We've noticed that in the regions where we have the most significant success in agriculture, it means that people get higher wage and higher pay. But maybe it's because they are the seasonal workers. But the poverty transfers to the rural area, and actually the share of poor population has increased. The second interesting question for discussion is, do we need to address the business saying you're so big and you have a lot of things we used to help you, issue some subsidies, and you need to be socially responsible? You need to either change this taxation system when actually the structures will actually give away a part of profit not only in the area of their location but in the area of location of their assets. And moreover, do we need to maintain the principle of actually excluding the taxation for different agricultural farms and businesses, as we have private companies? They're more often vertical, and looks like that the region loses part of tax, and these taxes get to other budgets, so the region gets no profit out of it. Maybe we need to review the taxation system so that part of the profit maybe will not be taxed, but the part that actually goes to other areas should be taxed in a way. Do we need to discuss the question from a more global perspective, that is taxation system change, limiting or extending the state support, or we shall not discuss this matters at all? The thing is, I'm just telling that we're getting the global questions we'd like to get the answers for. Well, I'd like to put it simple. Tax administration needs to be developed at all times. It should actually keep the pace with the time, but I don't feel like actually strengthening the taxation system. First of all, we need to streamline the tax base we currently use, and we need to assess the way we administer the things we have and the rights we have to. Now I would like to come back to one of the elements. This is the State Institute. I believe we need to invest and address all our efforts into the digitalization system. We need to do the institutional development. If we are talking about the land, and one of the main taxes currently is the cadastral assessment of land plots we experienced over the past times. It actually led to the fact that the land plot tax we could gain, and we have some consensus because business, they are ready to pay the land tax, but we do not collect the tax. In order to do that, we need actually to streamline and create high-quality informational base that will enable us not just simply resolve the land issues, but actually, to streamline the high-presume system. We used to use a separate standalone service that used to do the cadastral assessment. Now we recovered the service based on some state authorities and state bodies. As you might remember, Mr. President has actually appointed the responsible people for recovering this service when we used some scandal events when the cadastral assessment was done incorrectly. And now, in our region in 2019, a budgetary association will run the cadastral assessment, and I do believe that we will get an absolutely different quality of service. We need to stick to our agenda and actually remembered all the questions we discussed at our Russian conference. And often we ask the question, what is in Brazil? Brazil is developing and we don't know absolutely anything about it. That is why we kindly ask Serge to tell us what is agri-holding in business and how do large and medium and small business live together in Brazil, so that Brazil has actually jumped right ahead and now one of the largest agricultural center in the world. As you used to have some hunger and poverty there, but now the things are absolutely different. You're welcome. The floor is yours.
We have.
So, good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me, Natalia, also for the university, RANEPA. I will address the issue of how Brazilian agriculture has developed a kind of two-speed agriculture in the last, let's say, 40, 50 years. We have, in fact, two models of agriculture. One we call the agribusiness model. In a certain extent, we can compare this, what you have here with agri-holding system, and also with the bias of rural development, strongly based on family farms. So I will develop these two topics here in my presentation and raise some challenges and questions at the end. So just a quick scan about Brazil. Brazil is a country about 850 million hectares. We have five big biomes. I think you can see them. This is the Amazonia. There is just to show you here. This is the Cerrado region. This is a new area where agriculture is going through. Modernization of agriculture starts here in the south Brazil. Here we have the Pampa region. Is a flat region, starts here in South Brazil, goes to the Patagonia, to Argentina. Here is the Atlantic forest. A lot of devastation was here. And here is the semi-arid region, is the Caatinga. So this savanna, this Cerrado region, is a booming region of developing of Brazilian agriculture. So, So this is our population change in the last 60 years. Brazil is an urbanizing country. We have about 85% of people living in urban areas. In rural areas, we have just about 16%. So and more is going to be urban, and is also a trend in the next couple of years, especially in the next 20, 30 years, that the age of population is going higher. So the boom of the aging is also going problematic, especially in some regions, as the region that I live in, South Brazil. So here I give you a figure about the GDP and the population. You can see here that agriculture in Brazil has maintaining the performance of the GDP. The whole GDP has a quite a problematic performance since the last 20, 30 years, but agriculture has been increased, especially in the last 20 years, and now the contribution of the sectoral contribution of agribusiness to the whole GDP is about 22.5 to 23% in a whole. So some informations. This is just a quick introduction about Brazil for whom who had not yet an idea of Brazilian agriculture. So what about our agrarian structure? Agrarian structure is what you have been talking, reminds me very well my country. We also have a process of concentration of farmers and land in the hand of very few farms. In the last census that was just collected last year, we have if we have roughly organization of farms in 3 groups, small, medium, and large. Of course, it's a bit more complicated, but I'm making a bit simplification. We have about 91% of farmers below 100 hectares, you know, and they have 20 they owns more or less 20% of the land. A little bit later I will show you another figure how much farmers units they are. Medium farms means in this figure here between 100 hectares and 1,000 hectares. It's about 8% of the units, and they own 32% of the land. This is last census, just issued a couple of weeks ago. And large farms, bigger than 1,000 hectares, they are just 1% and own 48% of land. So it's an agrarian structure concentrate, and as we can see, I think I have another figure, we can see that the concentration is going higher from the farms that are bigger than 1,000 hectares in the last 20-30 years. So there is a trend in that direction. So the group of the middles are shrinking, small ones are increasing, and the big ones are concentrating in terms of the size. So let me tell you a little bit what explains then this situation. I have to give a quick step back in our history, looking at agricultural development. In the 70s, 1970, Brazil was quite underdeveloped in his agriculture. We had not enough food for our to supply our internal market. We just export coffee. Brazil was well known during the first period of the 20th century as a coffee exporter, a little bit cocoa, but not else. We really become a powerhouse of grain exporters since the 70s, and mainly from the middle of the 90s onwards. We had crises, food prices brings a lot of problems, especially with inflation and especially affecting the urban salaries. So the big challenge was how to develop a modernized agriculture in a tropical region of the world. The literature, international literature in economics and also in agrarian science says that it would not be possible to have an agriculture as in the north in tropical countries. But Brazil make it, and I can show you. And in cattle, for instance, in livestock, just cattle livestock productions from 1974 to the last census, these are data, you can see here that we developed a lot. All this area of that is painted in blue is now completely blue. You know, it means that our livestock cattle ranching is well developed. Our oval, this central in this Cerrado. So this is the expansion of the production of beef in this region. So this means that this is also happens with soy. Brazil increased in the last years soy production in the whole 74%, and just in this region, which is located exactly in here region. This is called Mato Piba. Mato Piba is the abbreviation of three departments. So there was an increase of 273% just in the last 2 censuses, 2006 and 2017. So you can see then on soy, we start in the 60s, more or less in South Brazil. Colleagues from RANEPA here, Professor Alexander Nikulin, Alexander Kurakin have been visiting these regions last November. So we developed, so here soy is spread all over the country, and is in the biggest production is in Mato Grosso, and is in the border of the Amazonian forest and the tropical forest. So these are some pictures, what are the farmers that we have. Most of them, these are farms located, there is also a cotton production, but and this is soy fields located in this area. So because of this, Brazil has been, these are some figures from the magazine The Economist. 4 or 5 years ago, they issue a number that says that, well, Brazil is the big food, will be the big food supplier for the world. It's not true at all. I don't believe it. I myself don't believe in that. I disagree with some people that think that. I think Russia, other countries, China, and other big countries will also have the same role in the next future. But the point is that this kind of agriculture with a grain combination with grain and livestock, beef and soy has been has the Brazilian model of producing food, and this is what we can call the Brazilian agribusiness. We can have some critics, but in general, this is what happened in the last 30, 40 years. Brazil was able to develop a tropical agriculture, to adapt soy varieties, to adapt other grain varieties to these regions, and is growing. Productivity is growing. The use of the land is growing with some hindrances we can discuss later. But more recently, I would say since this was the former was the process starting on the 70s. More recently, from the 1990s onwards, and especially in the last 10, 15 years, we developed another bias, another arm of our agriculture, which is rural development. Rural development based on supporting and developing, fostering family farming. Of course, we had in our history, as you here in Russia as well, a peasant tradition, a small-scale farmers. They always exist, but they were mostly self-consumption producers. Their importance to produce for the market were not so important at the time. But in the last, let's say, in the last 20, 30 years, family farming has become an important player in our rural areas, and is now developing an important role for Brazilian agriculture. If we look very also quickly over what happens in the last 20 years, I wrote a paper. We can talk about 3 generations of policies that helps to foster, to strengthening this family farming. What has been done? Well, first generation of policies, doesn't mean that even we start in 1993, different policies, different generation of policies continued up to date. First generation was to support family farmers with credit. We create a very important program of credit for with different interest rates for family farmers below market interests. And second, we also start with some land reforms. Brazil, since the President Fernando Henrique Cardoso in 1994, we recognize indigenous people land rights, and also there was a strong agrarian land reform program. This program, there were add with some policies for, let's say, social assistance from the 2000 onwards, especially under the government of President Lula. We developed the Zero Hunger initiative, which is a set of policies for poor people in rural areas. Generally speaking, there was to give money, to transfer money for poor people in rural areas in order that they increase their purchase power, in different ways, giving a minimum revenues income for poor families, and also make possible that food from the land settlements and from the small-scale farmers would be buy by public purchase system, like food for school meals, like food for food baskets for hospitals and even for the army. So these are provided by this small-scale farms. So and then the third generation is exactly the generation that we are now constructing. I would say to foster, to strengthen the markets for the family farms. And then was also important the policies that we had for support the cooperativism for these farmers. Well, maybe some of you have a curiosity. This was possible because Brazil creates a specific law to recognize family farms. What is a family farmer in Brazil? Well, it's a small-scale farm that have this kind of features. Well, we have a law that says that a family farmer is a farmer that predominantly works with the labor force of the own family, even though he can hire external labor force up to 2 permanent salaries. So why this law was important? Because through this law we could give better credit below interest of market, and the government could focusing more for these policies. So here I give you some photos about what are small-scale farmers in Brazil. They are different. If you look in South Brazil, we have a tradition more from European immigrants, Germans. For instance, I am a son of a German family. I'm Schneider. There are lots of Italians, Polish, and even Russians also in our South Brazil. And then in the Northeast, you have other colonizers. So, but this is more or less the landscape of the family farming. We have about, Brazil has 5,170,000 farms units. And family farming are 85% of that, 4,366,267 units, in average of land of 18.3 hectares. So this is an average. Of course, in Amazonia, a family farmer can be 200 hectares, 300 hectares. In South Brazil, even less. So, what were the drivers of this restructuring? What about the state policies? We have a set of policies. I have just time to highlight 3 of them. For the agribusiness sector, it was deadly important science and technology. And science and technology, especially through Embrapa. Brazil would never have this power agriculture, this export agriculture, without the role of Embrapa. Embrapa was created in 1972 to develop, to adapt agriculture, modern agriculture, to the tropics. Nowadays, Brazil has 74 Embrapa units, Embrapa centers. They are organized by centers. Colleagues from Russia, we visit one of wheat in my state, in Rio Grande do Sul. Then we have livestock. We have, nowadays we have Embrapas for new technology, for IT, and also for climate change. So different units taking care of different models. It's more or less the Brazilian initiative that repeat the CGR model, different organization by products. So, and the combination between Embrapa and the universities, agricultural universities, make us a very interesting combination and foster science and technology for agriculture. I should mention also the extension service, rural extension service. We had this especially during the 70s and the 80s, even though nowadays extension services is not that effective. The second tool was money. money was deadly important, credit and budget support for farmers. So here I can give you some current figures about what is the different credit for business agriculture or export-oriented agriculture and family farming agriculture. Last year or 2 years ago, in dollars, the credit, the amount of available credit for business agriculture was $65 billion dollars. Here is in reais, here is in dollars, $65 billion. And for family farming was about $9.6 billion dollars. This is every year we have a harvest plan, and the government, the state fix the interest rates. So because of this, it's important to have a law for family farms. Family farms can benefit from interest for loans below the market. So even I have some figures later about the interest rates. So this is credit for family farming. You can see in the last, since 1994-95, this process starts, and it grows during different governments. I hope it will continue. We have just set a new president 2 weeks ago. The number of contracts, the number of value, the value also increase. So it's really a value. Brazil honored. Brazil has a kind of pride of our family farming. So our modernization agriculture, we lost a lot of people in rural areas. That's true. You were just talking about employment. We had during the 70s we had a migration about 25 million people from rural to urban. That was problematic. But in the last demographic census and the last agricultural census, we can see a stabilization of number of people living in rural areas. So this is very interesting because, and I think this is a result of the successful of our policies. So this is a figure for the expenditure on research and development. So you can see that Embrapa owns 42%, and universities 26%. This is quite significant. Here you have the real interest rates figure from 2003 to last year. This is the blue line is the line of the market interest rates. You know what everyone that goes to the bank and loans money pays, and you can see the red line for farmers. Yeah, the interest rates are below that. So this is given a stimulus, given a support for farmer. And also we developed our rural development model, the second driver of our agriculture, through a different, also with credit, also with science and technology, but also with cooperativism. I would say social capital, cooperativism is key. It's very important for rural development. If I can leave a message, I would say support this because this is important. And this is a figure that I just took from the census last week, because I was invited. I thought, well, let's look at the census, what the census said about co-ops. It surprised me that if we look at different sizes of farms here, that co-ops are important in all kind of sizes of farms, not just on the small ones. So cooperativism is not in Brazil practicing just by small-scale farms, but also in big farms that have more than 500 hectares. So in the last census, our current census, that is even not all the results are published, 23.8% of all the farmers are engaged in co-ops. We visit some of them in Brazil. So here you can see the regions where the co-ops are more strong. The co-ops are more present in the regions where we had in the past the immigration and the colonization with European immigrants. More than is stronger in the south than in the northeast and in the region. So the contradiction is the regions where we have more poverty, where more poor people, the cooperative system is not that much developed. So let me then jump for some final remarks, and I will make 4 comments on that. First, for our debate, taking Brazil as a case, has the case. I would say that agriculture is a key driver for Brazilian economic development. So it's deadly important for the country. That's the point, you know. It represents 23% of the GDP. Second, Brazil has a dualistic model of agrarian and rural development. Although some quarrels and disputes, the fact is that big farmers and small and medium farmers coexist, and both has evolved through time. Internally, we have lots of fights. Some people prefer small-scale farms. Some people prefer agribusiness. Well, I cannot open up the debate here. This is an internal debate you maybe know about. But the point is that we evolved with this contradiction. In my opinion, there's not a problem to have these 2 drivers. They can coexist. They can evolve in the future. Third, the state and the policies have a critical role in Brazilian agriculture. In the first phase, in the 70s, through the modernization process, and today through science and credit. A final comment: if you look at the recent 30 years since our current constitution come in power, the 1988 constitution after the dictatorship, there was a new institutional arrangement between state and society through trade unions, through social movements that allows Brazil to reduce poverty rates reduced in Brazil, and increase food security for export. So let me raise 3 points as the agenda and challenges ahead. I have this time yet? No? Oh, very little. Oh. Agriculture and rurality, just to say, agriculture and rurality must give wider, better substantive contribution to sustainable development. So I support your point about the issue of environmental issues. I think that bigger agricultural productivity should not mean less sustainability. Productivity and sustainability have to go hand by hand. The international literature gives room nowadays to the debate, so-called the nexus between food, environmental, and energy as the key challenges for all. I think the SDGs, the Agenda 2030 from the United Nations, might represent a new landmark and reference for the agriculture in the 21st century. I think the 17 Sustainable Development Goals has to be our point of assessment if we have good or not performance in agriculture. And finally, demographic changes and food transition, especially related to health and consumption choices, will be key drivers to build a sustainable food system. I think the 21st century agriculture will be guided by the demand and not by the supply side, as it was in the 20th century. That's my suggestions to our debate. Thank you very much.
Microphone doesn't work. Microphone doesn't work. Speaker doesn't use the microphone. Please ask the speaker to turn on the mic. Is it possible to ask the speaker to turn on the mic? Microphone doesn't work. Distinguished organizers and colleagues, I'm in charge of the Timirazevsky Sustainability Center, which has been involved in consulting support, staff development, personnel development in the rural areas of our country. So we developed the first concept of sustainable development of rural areas back in 1999. We assisted many regions to draft their agendas of sustainable development, so we work mostly in the rural areas. So we have quite a good project, the Most Beautiful Villages of Russia Association. This is the going on project, and people in these settlements try to use their legacy to act as a driver of economic development and to attract as many tourists as possible using experience economy tools. It's well known that for surviving in a counter-sanction regime, our government decided to support large vertically integrated rural businesses. And you could see here the correlation of small and big businesses, 80 to 20. This is the classic exogenous model. This was the simplest decision which generated some fruit, and so we managed to overcome some problems. But now we are facing new challenges, and we have different issues for the discussion at this expert panel discussion. I would like to share our experience, how we worked in different regions. Talking about the advantages of the large-scale agricultural production, we speak about the efficiency, economic efficiency, but it's not always so. We could not say that agricultural business is only a business. It's heavily dependent on resources and weather conditions and climate conditions, and it has a huge impact on people, on environment. That's why we need to have a comprehensive approach to all externals or these effects, including social and economic effects. Introduction of holding companies doesn't have so many advantages when we keep this in mind, because people leave the areas, and when we have more digital technologies and robots and automation, then more and more people will leave the rural areas. Lots of these external factors are not taken into account in the real life. I used to be a kolkhoz worker. I worked as the master of the crew, and I also was in charge of the kolkhoz. I saw everything with my own eyes, and even at that time, I was already thinking why we have so many problems. So you could see the cultural legacy could be lost if we don't develop rural areas properly. In 4.5 years of work, we managed to organize about 25 different expeditions to different regions of Russia, and we had the expert review of more than 100 different rural settlements, whether they can join our association. Since we are the members of the association, the Most Beautiful Villages of Russia, we have a very strict criteria to pick up these most beautiful villages. You could see here on this slide 2 out of 10 groups of our criteria. The results are not very good. We have only 11 members, and about 20 members are just 20 settlements are just candidates. Agri-holding companies are the major impact of this situation. Unfortunately, we have only Rostov, in Rostov region, some owners who are socially oriented, and they have like a win-win situation there. But this is the exception. Most of agricultural business try to reduce non-core expenses. They use those methods of development which can generate some benefits for them. But social communities are not prepared for any development themselves. But we believe that we should ensure the high quality life of people living in the rural area, but we should not take into account only the interests of agricultural businesses, which contradict the interests of rural people. According to the Constitution, Article 7, we are a social state, and the major beneficiaries of such strategies and programs as sustainable development of rural areas should be the rural population, but not the narrow circle of agribusiness owners. Now, the state support is mostly focusing on the support of different large-scale investment projects. And if we don't change this approach, then there will be the outrageous imbalance of interests in the rural area. Recently, we managed to gain on the export of agricultural products. And now the task is to increase this export up to $45 million. So, but there could be high risks. For instance, the prices are very volatile for such produce, and the forecast is not very favorable. In the world, there is a different model which could be complementary to the agricultural businesses. France is quite a large producer of grain crops. They have one more model in place which is also economically efficient, and at the same time it gives boosts to give impetus to the development of small farms. For instance, they produce high quality produce, and it costs about 40 billion euro per year. And this is, and France is quite a small country, smaller than our country. It's important here to understand the interrelation between the type of agricultural business and the quality of life. We could see quite a significant impact of agricultural businesses on landscape. For instance, agricultural holdings companies have large fields. They produce tasteless, not very attractive produce, and people don't want to live there because the air or water or soil could be polluted. The landscape is not so attractive, but when we have small producers, they try to create attractive landscapes. So there could be different patched fields of different colors, nice gardens, and you could see here the regularity. The better food is, the better landscape is, and the better the higher the quality of life is. Large agri-holding companies have a dispersed and indigenous model, which is based on individual collective communities. But farmers and small companies, small agricultural businesses, are trying to attract communities, universities, different agencies. They try to develop their brands of cooperatives, to travel agencies, associations, and they make this entire network quite sustainable. The prices in this case are less volatile. For instance, in Italy, the regional produce amount to 10% of the total production, but this is quite a significant part of Italian export. At the same time, this produce is a kind of the window case or showcase. It is an image of the country, such as Italy or France or Spain. This is an additional positive driver. So then employment could also be increased because we have well-organized and well-arranged areas. People are happy. In Russia, we also have quite a high potential for the production of the regional produce. We have different national cuisine. We have not very extensively used the potential of woods for hunting, for fishing. Our rural areas are not agricultural due to our geography, so we don't have the arable lands. Then we have historical and other varieties of plants. We need to work at the selection level. We need to improve these varieties of the crops of the plants that we have. Very often, holding companies are located in the areas with high potential for employment. In Russia, we have lots of area. We have vast territories with a low density of population. But I believe that we have enough area to accommodate all types of enterprises and businesses. I believe for the sustainable development of agricultural sector, we should have a differentiation. So first, we should identify the environmentally sustainable areas with a low density in population and with favorable conditions for the development of agri-industrial areas. There should be also another areas where we should incentivize the relocalization of economy, where we could develop the individual housing construction, small-scale agricultural businesses that will produce high-quality produce for tourists and for local population, who will create attractive landscapes. And such areas will help us to get rid of the digital inequality between cities and villages. This also opens up huge opportunities for remote, for distance work, for distance learning. The high quality of life will trigger the migration of people back from urban areas to rural areas. At the round table, by the way, now there is the round table on the spatial development of rural areas on the 5th floor. So, and there was mentioned that people now want to go to leave the small village and go to the medium scale settlement, and then to the town, and then to the city. So this is the trend. But after people understand all the benefits, so to speak, of the city, people got disappointed and would like to move back to the village. But of course, everyone wants to live in a nice-looking village. By the way, here is one of the most beautiful villages. Let's ask the mayor what people move to the villages. And by the way, this will also intensify the birth rate in the rural areas, because for 2 years already our birth rate in rural areas is lower than in urban areas. So you see, now the rural areas are not supplying any human resources anymore. And this is just 15 million people living in the rural areas. So we have the state program for the sustainable development of rural areas. I believe that there we should include the culture and the environment, and this should be the new driver of rural development. I'm talking about two types of rural development, of rural territories, but there should be also intermediate areas taking into account OECD criteria. And we should, of course, use different measures and strategies to intensify, to trigger the spatial development of rural areas, of course, based on the state programs. So for many decades, the growth of cities was considered as the driver of the economic development, and villages, rural areas were considered as just the supplier of low-cost labor and also produce. Now we see that the industrial growth in the urban areas is lower and lower, and we see the imbalance, disproportion, inequality and poverty. That's why we need to move to the high-quality approach, which is focused on people living in the rural area, and there we should also develop the Institutes of Sustainable Development of Rural Areas. Thank you.
So no sound feed. The speaker is not speaking in the mic. No sound feed. No sound feed.
Да, I repeat you separately. Теперь бы я хотела представить слово Марине, которая, может быть, нам расскажет, а как же вот такая страна, которая сохраняет...
So those who actually manage to maintain like a quilt blanket, all different farms and all different companies that are able to produce products that may actually compete on a global market. Let's talk about Denmark. Denmark is quite a small country with a limited number of people. 90% of all populations and all the family farms. It's like the fairy tale country. Therefore, we are trying to actually position it as a fairy tale-like country. So, as we are limited in time, Therefore, I would like to briefly tell you about everything I wanted to tell you. The model we're trying to develop is quite standard. The model uh, was born in all different countries in Europe, the United States, in Russia, in Europe, in Scandinavian countries. It was based on standard conditions. And at the end, when the economy of different countries evolved in different ways, the model evolved, deformed, and transformed. Despite the fact that Denmark has been stable in development, we can actually see the changes in agricultural sector. This is a brief historical reference in Denmark, starting from the late 18th century. It just canceled different fees and switched to the rent payment for the land plot. This is fixed, and that is why the peasants were able to pay for the rent. They were able to rent the land plots. Later, when we got the first stages of Denmark, we actually generated a bark, and actually the free peasants get money in order actually to find some land plots and start their farming activities. They had low interest rates too, in order to enable these people to use the financial resources. And from this very moment, the state started thinking about the education of all the people working on the land, with the land, because that was the key starting point of Danish economy. Peasant is not actually the one who plows the land, but is the one who should be economically educated. He needs to know the profit. He needs to know how to manage the business of the land plot. That is why 50% of all these lands belong to the peasants. They get the credit system to the farmers, and they get some grants for educating farmers. And the state, they invest money not just in educating young farmers, but also in helping them in getting and actually improving their farms. When I tried to get ready for our discussion, I actually checked Russia. Well, in Russia and Denmark were pretty much close in that period. We worked hand in hand. Moreover, Russia in their cooperative work started a bit earlier than Denmark and Europe, and it actually made some steps. And then these steps looked pretty much similar to those made by Denmark. The main stages of cooperative movement in Denmark: significant crisis in late 19th century forced the farmers to reconsider their businesses. Therefore, we have different diversified farmers, as it was quite difficult to sell the products in the harvest. That is why farmers decided to be more cooperative. They just started actually switch from plant growing to cattle. They started active exports of cattle, and it was one of the largest markets of cattle in England. They started the development of cooperative movement. That is why Denmark had some examples to follow. The first cooperative milk facility was actually established in 1882. Russia had the first one in Kostroma region. In early 20th century, virtually all dairy products was delivered by cooperative establishment. In late 19th century, we note significant growth of pork export from Denmark to England. In 1887, we may just note the first cooperative slaughterhouse. Later on, Denmark creates different cooperative facilities for selling eggs, poultry, vegetables, fish, and fur. Small farmers find it quite difficult to survive. That is why they come together, and actually the initial 15 hectare per farm turns into 40 hectares. Now as the average area is 100 hectares. They consolidate the cooperatives, merge together, and we get the three main cooperative systems. This is dairy, meat, and food, fertilizers, and grains. Arla Food is the international holding that incorporates 6 countries. It means that we're switching to an absolutely different level of cooperative establishment. Nonetheless, we have some small cooperative establishments that equally take part in producing dairy products. This is a very interesting graph. You can see the trend and boom of cooperative facilities and the results the country has come to. Well, initially, we created 3 main cooperative establishments. There was a boom. The farmer 1 and farmer 2, farmer 3 farmers with 2 or 3 pigs or cows when just they grew it for sale, and they wanted to sell it at a more profitable price. Then they started to combine, to merge together, and in the ending part in 1960s, the cooperative establishments started to merge together, and actually, we actually started with 3 and we ended with 9 for all this period of time, from 1880 to 2015. But this means that we have some small farmers. But why? But the question is, why cooperative society? It's quite interesting. The system still, is still there and actually has managed to bring Denmark to the current state of development. It's actually, 5.7 million people produces a huge amount of food, like 5 times more than it is able to consume. And this is thanks to this cooperative system. Farmers sell everything together. They acquire things together. Farmers share the profit as per the volume of produced items. All the income actually gets the farmers get the income as per their share of participation. Farmers are not able to sell their shares, and the farmers take strategic decisions. They influence the price and actually investment plans as well. At the same time, it ensures that every single farmer takes an active part in the life of cooperative establishment and actually gets the profit. Cooperative principle is democratic management. One person has one vote. It works globally if you check the cooperative principles, and based on all the information of International Cooperative Alliance, it means that these are the 7 principles. So in Denmark, we have 4 main principles that actually make the success of any cooperative establishment. One person, one voice, no matter how large your establishment is. So volunteering and open membership for all these citizens that take an active role. Dividends are not paid, and actually all the revenue and all the income belongs to the members of this cooperative establishment and is distributed between the cooperative and the members. Once again, I would like to stress, no share dividends. So this membership has no commercial purpose. It's not a financial tool. And all the revenue, all the income is distributed between the cooperative members, depending on this charter of the cooperative establishment. Today in Denmark, we have the current situation. pork and dairy product production is carried out by all these cooperative 100%, 2 dairy and 5 pork slaughter farms. It actually combines and unites the whole farming society of Denmark. As for the beef production, all the cooperative take out 2/3 of all the volume. Grain products is like the algae, if the fur is actively developed. Acquisition. So I would like to know the following. Farmers, as a material producer, is not a member of farm cooperative. The farmer is independent. He takes the decision on his own, produces the product, but cooperative system starts working on the next stage at the level of processing of the raw material. This is the next level. The independent farmer is able to decide what to produce, when to produce, and how to produce. But of course, there are specific frameworks, specific requirements, and standards posed to the products, but it's just details. We have no time to discuss this. Denmark has no specific cooperative legislation. You know, it's a great question whenever Russia is trying to consider creating cooperative establishment, because they say that there is the state activities that, in order to work, they think that the state shall take specific steps. Denmark has no legislation. Denmark, in constitution, says that Denmark are able to create civil combinations for any purposes without any prior notification. And then it says that the state has no right to affect the operation of these companies, of these businesses, if provided these establishments pose no risk to the state. That is all. This document is enough to make all the cooperative activities and establishments effective. One of the main principles, the cooperative shall work within the legislation of Denmark. We're talking about the land legislation, labor, and tax legislation. Therefore, there are no ministries or bodies who actually manage or supervise their activity. We have no time. We have the cooperative corporate model in Denmark. It's quite an interesting slide. It clearly demonstrates that cooperative establishment transfers from small specified farms to a brand new notion and level of international cooperative establishment. Probably it may be interesting for Russian to discuss in the future, and probably you will be able to discuss. Denmark is a small country, but Arles has managed to develop such a system that unites 6 countries using the same cooperative democracy principles, demonstrate efficient production of dairy products. Is number 3 producer of dairy products globally. Therefore, I believe Russia may pose specific interest to this type of model and this establishment. And now a few words about the figures. Denmark population is 5.7 million people. The area of Denmark is not quite big. That is 43,000 square kilometers. Moscow region is virtually 44,000 square kilometers. That is why you can compare 5.7 million people on 43,000 square kilometers. And they produce a huge volume of agricultural products. 61% of all the land plot is dedicated to farming lands. You can see the average size of farm is 71.9 hectares. Over 20 farms exceeds the area of 100 hectares. And in Denmark, 190,000 people are busy in agricultural sector. So Denmark has a large Agricultural Association Landbruk and Fortbewarer. It unites 300 companies and 30,000 farmers. That is virtually all the farmers and all the cooperative establishment in Denmark. And they promote different legal acts, different norms, different regulating activities, environment safety, and all other matters. This association helps cooperatives and farmers to act on equal conditions. This is the so-called leveraging principle and leveraging association, no matter what activity they're running. This is virtually everything I wanted. Of course, I just wanted to be more detailed and more specific, but as we have time limit, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina, for your presentation. So we don't have so much time, but we have 10 minutes to ask questions. So we will use the time of our break. But please use the microphone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your presentations. My question goes to Dmitry Butusov. You said that in Ural region, the number of peasant farms and private households is reducing, but you know that profitability in seed growing, sunflower seed growing is very high. It's 80%. In cattle rearing, we also see the increase in productivity, but the number of businesses is increasing. No, I'm not saying that. I just mentioned the result of the census over the last decade, but clearly there is the growth in the production, and we see the trends in the development. So we see some small benefits which needs support, that needs infrastructure, and if small businesses do not see the support infrastructure, they just leave the market, and there we have only large businesses that can survive. And this is the global trend for Russia. As for profitability in our region, it's really high, and the profitability in 2017 is more than the average statistics by 20%. That's it. I'm not going to take the time of my colleagues. So the next question, my question to the last speaker. Why, despite all the advantages of cooperative movement in our country, everything is not progressing so well? So let's refer to the Denmark lessons. Well, it's hard for me to say, but if we have at the historical development of Russia and Denmark, these are two absolutely different historical ways. I told you in my presentation that first financial cooperatives were set up in Denmark to produce milk, and this process was quite successful till a particular time. And during this time, Denmark had no crisis, no turbulent times. So there were some changes because of the economic crisis, but sometimes this crisis had a positive impact on the development. In Russia, we had 1917. There was the change towards the development of cooperative movement, and the process of cooperatives establishment was staggered. The first cooperative in Kostomy region, which was set up in Kostomy region, was initiated by not by peasants but by intellectually developed people, so to speak, who wanted to help peasants to live better in the rural area. So you see, in Denmark, we have the grassroots development from bottom to top, and the farmers decide whether they need cooperatives or not. This is the freedom of choice, the freedom of action. In Russia, we had a different situation. All the decisions were imposed from the top to the bottom, and we had different crises. Alexander Flamingo, the National University on land, land development. My question to Sergio and Marina. So as for the agricultural census, we have the same in Denmark and Brazil. And during the agricultural census, we saw that our statistical data and the agricultural data are absolutely different when we speak about the productivity of peasant farms or private households. And the agricultural lands, which could be checked, are located in the regions. Maybe even Mitri can help me to get the answer. In the regions, we have up to 20% of agricultural lands. How do you perform the agricultural census in Denmark and Brazil to avoid any distortion of the information? Or maybe you will discuss this privately, behind the scenes, so to speak. Maybe I will. Who will start? In a nutshell. So here we could have a look at the different structural development of Russia or Denmark. Denmark is a small country which is well structured from old ages. Every hectare is registered. Every pig, every poultry unit is registered. We have a very good registration system of people, land, and cattle. So this is not a challenge for us. This is not an issue because we have already the available database for everyone.
Yes, through this law 2006 of family farming, we even have a census that you can have the land distribution and all data for family farming and non-family farming. So our census is I would say that is really a good tool for development. Of course, we have some problems of farmers that don't like to give information about their earnings, incomes, and what they expend, because through this the government can calculate the taxation. So this is a shortcoming. And second, I would say the problem is exactly go to the far away Amazonia and to collect the data. It takes months to go in the deep forest to interview farmers. That's the difficult, but not at all in the other regions in terms of. So our census is quite it's quite confident. So I would say that.
Добрый день,
Good afternoon, Vyacheslav Kurchkin, supporter of Russia, the member of the Ministry of Agriculture. Our topic is institutional restructuring of agriculture completed. So is it possible to have this restructuring without new economic models? And if we have institutional restructuring, why? 1.3 million agricultural areas, we produce only 34% of all produce. I'm talking about private households. The only form of agricultural units which grew in the last years. And when we speak about the profitability of agricultural businesses, we should take into account the state support, and they should be deducted from the profitability of agricultural businesses. Profitability does not impact in agriculture the income tax, but to get the subsidies, many agricultural businesses try to increase artificially their profitability. And when we discuss these different issues, in fact, the situation is much more complicated. I'm afraid we won't be able to give you the answer given the lack of time. So I would like to give the floor to Dmitry. So speaking about profitability, so let's take 2017. I believe that when we describe agriculture, we should refer to different ages, but we would not refer to 2016, which was a disaster for agriculture. And I agree that here we try to simplify our approach just because we don't have much time. But I would like to say one thing: what to do in the light of institutional restructuring. and the development of institutions and the infrastructure. So we need consultancy centers, we need infrastructure and land management, which has been mentioned. So due to technical means, we can simplify this procedure. You don't need to go to every house and ask people, because some people, of course, will not tell you all the truth, and this is the case. I apologize that we failed to give you the chance to ask the questions, but I hope you will talk after this session. The session was quite short. And now let's thank our speakers, our panelists. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank you for attending our session.